Welcome to episode number 41 of Hoop Talk Fanatics. I am here with my co-host Chris Corn, and we got a lot to dive into, including the Big 12 conference, looking ahead to next week, and the biggest games on the schedule, and uh, obviously tomorrow's games. There's some good games on tomorrow, and welcome.
So let's get it. It's been a fun season so far.
So I was looking at the schedule for the Big 12 conference tomorrow, and there was some that stood out to me. The West Virginia Oklahoma game should be an interesting matchup. What do you think about that one?
That's a big one. Both teams could really use a win. West Virginia, they're still winless in conference because they lost a tough one against Baylor, and Oklahoma's only got one win. So this is the game both teams really need for NCAA tournament chances. You got to rack up these wins, and I think West Virginia's in a tough spot, 0-4. They lost a couple tough home games, but Oklahoma after the tough one, they should almost won at KU. They should have been able to close it out, but they couldn't. Now you head back home against probably the worst team in the conference, even though there's no bad team. That's one Oklahoma needs to get, and I expect them to find a way to get it done. But it's a game both teams need to win. It's still mid January, so it's a lot of basketball left to be played this season. But
Yeah.
you got to win these games if you're going to start trending in the right direction.
hmm I'm just looking at Oklahoma's schedule. I'm not sure who they play after that.
They got, I think, I can pull it up. I got it. They got a tough little stretch, but some winnable games. They go at Oklahoma State and state rivalry, but it's very winnable. And then they host Baylor at TCU and then host Alabama. So I mean,
hmm
it's the Big 12. It's not going to get any easier. So you just gotta win the games you can and find ways to steal a couple maybe you shouldn't get. And they had a chance to do that against KU, like I mentioned. They didn't. They
Yeah.
had close ones, like they lost by one against Texas and three at home against both those were home games against Texas and Iowa State. They lost by four combined points. And I mean,
hmm
those 4 points could be the difference between having a couple more big wins on the resume compared to maybe not having enough to get in. So we'll see. These games in January matter a lot
Yeah.
compared to whether things will shake up here in 2 months as we get closer to selection day.
So the next game that I found interesting is the TCU Kansas State game. Um,
It's a big
that should be a huge game for the Big
that
12.
that is a huge one. Kansas State is looking to get another road win. The week last week was insane. It was way past 20 too deep, but they won at Texas and at Baylor in big
Mhm.
fashion. They put up a lot of points in those games, and they've done that. They struggled a little bit against Oklahoma State, but they battled. There's a great atmosphere. I was there, and it was probably the loudest it's been in that stadium in years. So it's
Mhm.
really good to see. They're really picking it back up, and if they can win this game against TCU, they're going to be top 7 or 8 ish in
Mhm.
a game against Kansas. If they win, it's two top 10 teams at least. Two of the best teams in the country on Tuesday. So both teams are getting ready for that. But TCU on the flip side, their team, remember how last season ended? They lost a tough one to Arizona in second round NCAA tournament. And they've had some ups and downs to start the season, but I mean, they're 13-3, 2-2 in conference, and they play pretty good basketball. Um, I know they lost that tough one against Texas. It was, I don't know if it's Tuesday or Wednesday, but this week they lost a tough one a couple days ago. And they
Mhm.
also lost against Iowa State. So they've lost back to back games by combined six points, I think. Yeah, 6 points. So I mean, that's I said that about Oklahoma. I said about TCU. Now, like that's all these teams. All these teams are losing. Like all the games are close. And I talk about KU and K State. They're both 4-0. Iowa State's also 4-0. They've been on the right side of winning these close games. And teams like TCU, Oklahoma State, a lot of teams have been on the wrong side of multiple close losses. And that's basically been the difference so far in the Big 12 conference,
Mhm.
finding ways to win down the stretch and closing games out. You had a big lead at Texas. They had a chance to get a huge statement win, and they couldn't get it done. And now they have another chance to get a big home win against Kansas State. And on the flip side, Kansas State's looking for another huge win to continue building towards what they're trying to make a special season. But I'm
Hmm.
excited for that one. Mike Miles, Marquise Noel, two of the best guards in the country, maybe the best two, quite
Hmm.
honestly. Some special players on both sides. And it's going to be a fun matchup. It's probably the game I'm most looking forward to this weekend in all of college basketball.
That game, if I'm not mistaken, that game is at TCU.
It is at TCU, yeah.
Okay.
That's one thing. I don't. Every place in the Big 12 is tough to play. Every place to
Hmm.
play in a lot, like most conferences like this, when it's so competitive, it's tough to play. I view TCU as one of the lower tier places. Like, I don't think it's a. I mean, it's hostile. TCU. We saw their football fans. We saw the energy they brought. They're bringing similar energy in basketball, but I don't view it as quite necessarily like when you think of tough places to play in the Big 12. You don't necessarily think of Fort Worth and the TCU Horned Frogs, but they're going to have a chance to really make a statement by getting a big home win this weekend.
Hmm. Uh, and what are your thoughts on the Kansas and Iowa State game?
This is a big one. Iowa State's a team that's really surprised me this season. I also say Kansas has surprised me as well. They've been a lot. They were a lot better than most people, probably anybody expected, and they've really gone. Their defense has been phenomenal, which was expected. But KJ Adams has been great. And it's just they've won a lot of games, but Iowa State they're 4-0 in conference, and I've talked about close games. They beat Baylor convincingly in the first game. That was a surprise, but the other three, oh, Texas Tech, they rolled as well. But I mean, they've won a couple close ones at Oklahoma and at TCU, a couple of teams that we've talked about who have
Hmm.
struggled to win those games. Iowa State's been on the right side, one possession ball games, both on the road as well, at Oklahoma and at TCU. So, like, winning close ball games on the road are key. And I think it's going to be a close one here against Kansas as well. Iowa State's a team who they were one of the teams early. We probably talked about them in one of our episodes going over the non-conference tournament. They were the one of the teams that were most impressive in those, and they've really continued it throughout the season. And I mean, this is the big a 4-0 matchup. Like there's 3 4-0 teams in the Big 12. You don't. That's not very often you see teams. Can they? These teams really separate themselves from the pack, or are we gonna? I expect it to get a lot more congested. These teams will start getting a few losses, but this is a huge matchup, and it's going to be one of the best games of the weekend. And
Hmm.
I definitely do think Kansas will bounce back a little bit because they really struggled against Oklahoma, but both their home games in conference have been really disappointing performances against Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. They do rally from double digits in both those games in the second half, and that's Allen Fieldhouse is a tough place to play, so you can do that, but that's
Hmm.
not a recipe for success over the
Yeah.
long course of the season. Because if you start falling behind double digits, not that Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are bad teams, but if you fall behind double digits to like TCU, Kansas State, even if you fall behind double digits again when you're playing Oklahoma and Oklahoma State later, you're not going to win any of those games, no matter how
Hmm.
you may feel, how much confidence they may have in themselves. That's not a recipe for success. So I'm interested to see if they can get out of the gates a little bit better. But on the flip side, Iowa State, if you can come get up a little bit on Kansas, you want to quiet that crowd. I'll be there, so it's going to be an interesting atmosphere. Iowa State fans are great; they always travel well, so I expect them to have a good turnout as well. But Iowa State's they've got to hit some tough shots, and but overall they lost their best player to transfer last season. Kyrie Turner's at Texas now. We know how big he's been for them, and for them to have the success they've had despite losing
Hmm.
him, a lot of in-conference transfers in the Big 12 is so interesting to me, but that's a different topic to discuss. But they lost Turner, and they haven't missed a beat, and they've still taken that next step of the team, which is very encouraging to see.
Hmm. What are your thoughts on the Oklahoma State Baylor game?
That's a good one. Baylor is a team they fell 0-3, and I was really surprised by that. They took care of business against West Virginia. It wasn't easy, but now they come home Oklahoma State. That's the one they have to get. I still view Baylor as one of the better teams in the Big 12. They haven't shown it. They've been a little bit up and down, and their guard play hasn't been quite as explosive on the offensive end outside of Keontae George. He has been special talent. I don't know how much
Hmm.
you've watched Baylor, Alex, but he has been one of the best freshmen, maybe the best freshman in the country. Um, Gallagher, Miller from Bama is probably the other one, but Keontae George has been special. He put up he had to carry them against West Virginia. He put up 30 some points in the
Hmm.
road win at in Morgantown. West Virginia's not as good as they used to be a few years ago, but in Morgantown, it's still a tough place to play, and you got to play well to win there. And he carried them almost single-handedly down the stretch. I felt like when I was watching that, and he's going to have to do that for a lot of the season. But we need to see more of the veterans step up. Flagler, Cryer, a lot of foul trouble kind of put them in a weird flow that game, but they have guys who can score the ball, and they're going to need more consistently from some of the upperclassmen if they're going to make a run towards the top of the Big 12 standing. But I do expect them to win this game, and I think they can win it pretty convincingly if they play up to their standards.
Mm-hmm. I see Baylor plays Texas Tech after that, and at Oklahoma the following Saturday.
Yeah, so I mean they got a few games they can really like. These are going to be tough games for them, but these are three games that they will be favored in, no matter how they like. They are three games they should be favored in my opinion. They're better than all three of these teams. Road factors, but I think they have a chance to win these three games and really get their I want to say season back on track. I mean, it would do that, but like they're not off track. It's just they struggle a little bit. I don't think it's anything they need to panic about. But you have to take care. Starts with taking care of business against Oklahoma State, which they need to do. We'll see how that game goes tomorrow. But and then you could start thinking about winning on the road is tough, but Lubbock is a very tough place to play, and we'll see if Baylor can get that done. But it starts with Oklahoma State. But I do expect Baylor to be the one team that's kind of near the bottom of the standings to really work their way back up into the top of the pack and at least finish above 500 in the conference play. But it all starts with the 3-game stretch that they got coming. If they can't win at least two of those, they're in a little bit of trouble, I think.
And the last game that I found interesting is Texas Tech.
Yeah, this is the big one. So we talked about both teams a little bit, just going over how they played against other teams. But Texas Tech is 0-4 in conference, and two home games were brutal. They lost a tough one against Kansas and Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. They had a chance against TCU the first in this opener. They lost that one, and then they got blown out against Iowa State Tuesday or whenever they played this week. Now at Texas, it's not getting any easier for them. They've had chances to get a couple and start 2-2, 3-1. Like they've had chances to win these games they played, and they haven't capitalized. And it's not going to get any easier. It starts you at Texas. Texas struggling against TCU. I think they're starting to find their rhythm a little bit. It's always a tough adjustment when you lose your head coach. We don't go like his situation. We don't worry about why he's left. But anytime you lose a head coach like that, it's just tough for the program and the players because like they bought into him. You have different thoughts on what he did and like whatnot, but like him he was a really good coach. Like in between the lines, like he did a good job and he led this team and he had this team rolling early in the season. And he did so many great things in his past, like his record is there, but like losing him and like the way they lost him too, it's like that carries a weight on their shoulder. And I think it took them a little bit to get adjusted, but I think they're back. They are back in that rhythm, and they're a really good team. And I think they kind of are under the radar a little bit now. Because early in the season, they're like, this team can win it all. And now just like I think they still are that talented team. They have a lot of good players, and they're backcourt. Marcus Carr and Tyrese Turner. It's like those guys can get after it on both sides of the ball, and I think they will be asked to do that. And I think that's going to give Texas Tech a lot of problems. Those two up front, and just the athleticism Texas has. I think they have the roster to really make a run. But yeah, this is the game Texas Tech needs. Not necessarily needs, but you're 0-4. You got to find a way to win a couple of these tough games. As we mentioned, a lot of these teams have tough schedules, but like they go to Texas and then they host Baylor, which is not going to be easy. We talked about that one a little bit. And then they go to Manhattan to play Kansas State. And like that is a tough one. It's a tough place to play in Bramlage. And those are three games they are not going to be picked to win. And they need to find a way to win some of these games. If you can even steal at least one or two, like if you can steal two of them, then it's huge to really ride the ship and get their confidence moving forward. But if you're like 0-6, 1-6, 0-7 in conference to start, that's not an NCAA tournament team, and that really sets you back. No matter how good you think you are, and like because I don't know how much you watch them play, but they're a decent team. They're definitely NCAA tournament caliber. they
Hmm.
could potentially get there. But like you have to, even though you're in this tough conference, you have to win some games. There. And they haven't done that yet. And we'll see if they can start the trend this Saturday against Texas.
Hmm. And there's two other non-Big 12 games that I typed, which is Clemson, Duke, and New Mexico and San Diego State.
Duke Clemson is really interesting to me. Clemson is a lot better than I thought they'd be this season. Like I am
Hmm.
personally shocked that they play as well. They have, I will say, schedule's not extremely tough, but they've won a lot of games I did not think they would.
Hmm.
They've won it like non-conference. They lost a couple, like at South Carolina. So like they haven't played a tough schedule. Like they haven't played any great teams. But I mean, they've good basketball. Like I think Clemson's going to win it. I think they're the better team, and I think they'll win pretty
Hmm.
not convincingly, but I think they win this game for sure. Duke struggled this season. I mean, Clemson hasn't lost in the ACC, I don't believe. I don't know the standings of them, but they haven't lost in a while unless they played one earlier in the season. They haven't lost ACC game, and they beat some of the better teams. They beat NC State pretty convincingly at home. I remember watching that one a couple weeks ago. And they also won at Virginia Tech and at Pittsburgh, and it all starts. Hunter Tyson's been really good for them. He's put up some big points. He's averaging up check. He's averaging 16 points. PJ Hall and Hunter, like they were a really good team. They're a lot better, and they play together as a team. And but I mean, this is also a big test for Duke. They've
Hmm.
struggled a little bit this season, but they're still Duke. They still have talent. They haven't played up to their standards, but they're still a team that can easily turn it around. We've talked about some of the blue bloods who have struggled more. Kentucky's hate to do this to you, but Nova struggled as well. A couple of these teams have not been up to their standards, and some of them aren't going to be able to turn around and do what they set out to do this season. But I think Duke's still a team who can right the ship. Maybe not win a national title and thing like that, but I think Duke can still be very good.
Hmm.
And I think they've shown that at times a little bit. But this is a tough place to play in Clemson. The atmosphere is going to be crazy. Their basketball team, they've been playing phenomenal, and they're always going to show out against Duke. So, I mean, it's a good test for both teams, but I think Clemson's going to win it. I think they're the better team, and
Hmm.
I think they'll show that this Saturday.
There's one Sunday game uh, that I like, Marquette Xavier. Uh,
I think good.
so what are your thoughts on that one?
That is going to be a fun game. Xavier's won a lot of games in a row.
Hmm.
I don't. That's 10. I'll just yeah, 10. It looks like they haven't lost in the Big East. I don't think. Yeah, they've been great. I've watched. I feel you watch even more Big East basketball than I do, but I love watching the Big East.
Hmm.
And just Xavier's. I'm just looking at their game. They started the Big East with a few easy games: Georgetown, St. Hall, St. John's. I mean, no game's easy, but they started with some of the bottom tier teams. They took care of business. Then they beat Connecticut. They went to Villanova, and they beat Creighton at home. So they those home they've taken care of business at home, and they won at Villanova and St.
Hmm.
John's. So they've won a couple different places. They've been a team that's really impressed me this season. I really like how they played. Um, Boom, Fremantle, Nanji, like they have a good crew, and I think they've all played well this season. That's five guys averaging double digits, and like they've really put it together. I haven't been able to watch Marquette as much. I watched them a little bit. I didn't get to watch the game against UConn, so if you watch that game, you can speak on it a little bit more than me. But I watched when they played Providence a while back, and that was a crazy game that they
Hmm.
lost. But I mean, I think this is a good game, good team. Um, I'll go Darlow has played well for him. Jones, Mitchell, like they have guys who can really play. I think. So I think it's going to be very competitive. But yeah, if you have anything to add, I'm okay. You can go for it. But I expect Xavier to keep their streak going.
Hmm. I didn't get to see the Marquette UConn game because I was at the St. Joe's game Wednesday night,
I
so I didn't get the chance to see
say.
it. But
I can pull up. Let's see. Thanks, yeah, just seemed like normal. The guy that kind of talked about Jones at 15. They just seem like they defended the 3-point line well. Yeah, just a hard fought game. It looks like based off the box score. Which
Yeah.
UConn's played. They've lost a lot of games in conference. They've lost like 3 or 4 now, and people are gonna overreact to it. I think
Hmm.
they've already played 3 or 4 of their toughest games. Like
Yeah.
I think they've all been tough road games they've lost. They played at Marquette, at Providence, and at Xavier. They might not
Hmm.
be 3 tougher games in the Big East in those 3 games, honestly. Those are probably, I would say, the 3 best teams besides Creighton's the other in the mix of the top 5. But they've already played those 3 road games.
Hmm.
You would have liked to get one of those, though. Like, it's definitely discouraging you haven't been able to get one of those big road ones. But they don't have any bad losses. Like, they're the 3 really good teams on the road. They still do go to Creighton, and they go to Villanova later. So, like, they'll have a chance to prove themselves on the road. And they also go to Seton Hall, who's a decent team. They'll play their series soon, like
Hmm.
next week or two. So, like, they have a chance. But it's been interesting to see how UConn's played. They've lost these games, and like we've talked about so much. Already talked about so much Big 12 and Big East. Like these conferences are the most competitive, and it's not really close in my opinion. The
Hmm.
Big Ten's competitive, but it's a different way. Like there's no great teams in there, and maybe there's not any even great teams. It doesn't feel like there may not even be any like elite teams in the Big East even, or like Big 12. Who knows how it's going to shape out? But like they're
Hmm.
so competitive from top to bottom, and it's good basketball all around. You love watching us play, so it's going to be interesting how these conferences fall out. You also mentioned, I think we missed it, but you mentioned what it's San Diego State game
Yeah.
tomorrow night. Who did they play, or who will they
Uh,
play?
they play New Mexico.
So that's a good one. I'm glad you did mention that. San Diego State is a really good team,
Hmm.
but so was New Mexico. They started. They may have been the last undefeated. I don't know for sure. But both those teams, I hope we get to see both in the NCAA tournament. I expect we will, unless
Hmm.
if New Mexico struggles a little bit more in Mountain West Conference, who knows? But San Diego State's always a good team, and that's definitely a game I'm going to keep an eye on. It is at
Hmm.
8 p.m. tomorrow, so I'll be able to definitely one I am going to tune in for. I like the Mountain West as a whole, though. Honestly,
Hmm.
a lot of decent teams. It's not. It's the super competitive conference too. Like when we think of competitive conferences, we'll think of like the Big 12 East, but Mountain West is close. That they don't like the town. It's down a little bit, and like how good the
Hmm.
teams are, but like it's super competitive. There's a lot of good teams in that conference. Like even the teams at the bottom. Wyoming's really disappointed me this season.
Yeah.
They lost some of the best guys, but overall, because Colorado State and Wyoming were tournament teams last year, I think, and they're at the bottom right now. UNLV's been impressive at times. It's a really fun conference that I definitely think people should tune into more often.
Hmm. Actually, just looking at New Mexico, their schedule, and they have San Jose State next Tuesday, and then uh, next Friday they have a, a home game against Boise State.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, that's like people discredit them in these comps, but those aren't easy games to play. Like at San
Hmm.
Diego State's as tough of a game as anybody's playing this weekend. Honestly, like there's not a lot of tougher places to play, and there's not a lot of better teams than San Diego State right now. Honestly, the way they've played, I think they're really starting to get in a groove. We watch them. I don't. But also, New Mexico just played Oral Roberts. That was a fun matchup. A couple probably earlier this week. They won by 7. Those are 2 really good teams. I hope we get to see both in the NCAA tournament. Oral
Hmm.
Roberts has been fun as well. But San Diego State's a team we watched in the Maui Invitational. I think it was the Maui Invitational, yeah. And they got 4th. They beat Ohio State, lost to Arizona, and lost to Arkansas. That Arkansas game was fantastic.
Hmm.
For 3rd place, and they lost that. And then they also lost at St. Mary's. But I mean, they've beaten BYU, Stanford, Ohio State. They have a lot of good wins, and that's what that's what they do. And they're the top of the class in the Mountain West, but there's a lot of good teams out there that is going to make their next couple months super exciting in that conference.
Hmm. And that's the biggest games to keep an eye on next week. the ones that came out to me was KU at KSU next Tuesday.
Ooh, that is Tuesday. We got some big. That's gonna be a game. I'll be in attendance, so I'm excited for that one. But it is going to be intense atmosphere. I've been
Hmm.
I've been going to five. I've been probably 6 or 7 Kansas State games season. The atmosphere has not been good, but the last game against Oklahoma State finally had a good crowd. Like we're like they've had decent crowd, but like they showed up and they were loud and they struggled a little bit, but they battled and like, they're ready. It's Tuesdays is the 17th is the first day classes resume, so all the students will be back. The
Hmm.
atmosphere on campus will be crazy, and hopefully both teams win. If both teams win Saturday, it's gonna be like a 2 versus 7 or 8 matchup. It's gonna be two of the best teams in the country right now, no matter
Hmm.
what like where they're ranked. These are two teams that are playing as good as anybody, and they have some contrasting styles. K State will play with a little more size, and
Hmm.
but KU can really get after defensively. They have the guys who will make it tough on them. But the point guard matchup is what really interests me. DeJuan Harris against Marquise Noel, two of the best point guards in the country, but their games are so different. Noel's really gonna let it fly offensively, and he's dishing it out. He's averaging like 10 assists per game this season, and
Hmm.
he's been doing that consistently. And you don't see that in college basketball. So it's fantastic what he's been able to do running the offense because so much of his highlights are his big time shots, but he's dishing it out to his teammates and his main go to guy, partner in crime, Keontae Johnson. What a story he's been this season. We love it because his incident in Florida, he was out for a couple seasons and it was like, is he ever gonna be able to play again? We're glad he lived and he was out here playing basketball. Him even getting a scholarship to play Kansas State was such a story, but he's as good as he ever was, honestly. And
Hmm.
he's all Big 12 caliber player, all American candidate, and him and Noel is good of a duo, at least on the offensive end, as you've seen in the country. But they've been great defensively as well. And just not many teams have a duo as skilled as those two. And Kansas is one of the teams that probably does have talent with them. And it'll be interesting to see how that game goes out. It's a place KU traditionally would lose some of the tough games like this. They barely won last season at K State.
Hmm.
And Kansas State was not good last year, and they almost lost that game. So it's going to be anybody's guess who's going to win, but that is probably one of the best games we've had so far this college basketball season.
So Wednesday slate seems to be the best slate of games during the
Definitely.
week next week. Uh, the games that came to my mind were Arkansas, Missouri, Providence, Marquette, and LSU, Auburn.
It's crazy. Arkansas, Missouri already playing. They already played this season. They're playing a second time so soon. I don't like that. That's
Yeah.
a couple. The Big 12's doing that too. KU and K State playing like they play Tuesday and then they play 2 weeks from Tuesday. Really,
Hmm.
they play a lot. Super quick. But yeah, Arkansas, Missouri. The first one, Missouri lost at Arkansas, but it was a really fun game. It was a game they should have been able to win. But they lost on the road. Auburn LSU, good one mentioned. Interesting to see how that one goes. Auburn's been a little bit up and down this season, but
Hmm.
I think they're the better team, but winning at LSU is not going to be easy in
Hmm.
that one for sure. And then so much Providence Marquette. Both teams have big games before that matchup, but it's that one's going to be exciting. Marquette's done a good job taking care of business at home this season, but Providence has won a lot of games. I don't think they've lost either. The big them they've both undefeated. So yeah, they also. I mean, it's some big matchups going on Wednesday. It's conference season. We're rolling into conference play. All these tough matchups. At any given day, there's going to be at least a couple good matchups in a conference. Like Friday
Hmm.
nights, like tonight's is not a ton, but even we got a couple good ones tonight. Like most days, there's going to be some fun matchups for you to watch, and I'm loving it and excited for the rest of the season.
And there's one more game that I would like to talk about. Next Thursday, Arizona State meets UCLA.
That's a good one. That'll be a good one. Pac-12's been interesting to me this season. It's not exactly gone how I thought. I thought Arizona would be a little bit. I thought it would be Arizona as like the clear
Hmm.
best, and then a couple of other teams. But UCLA has been fantastic. Arizona State has been really good, and I did not expect that at all. So Arizona State, UCLA, two the best teams in the conference, and that is a huge matchup. It is in Tempe, I believe. It should be. It looks like yeah. So UCLA's got to go on the road in a tough environment, but I mean it's the game they're going to be able. They're going to have a chance to win, and it's definitely a great matchup. But I'm interested to see how UCLA handles this is the adversity that'll come with playing a tough road game because UCLA is a team that I think can win a national championship, and how you perform on the road in some tough environments, I think, are really can really show who you are, the team.
Uh, we definitely got a loaded slate of games the next week, and looking forward to tomorrow's slate as well. And we'll definitely be back s soon as possible with another episode of recapping games. And I look forward to recapping the ones that we talked about today.
Like, yeah, we're gonna have a lot to talk about, so hopefully we can get one next week. And oh, it's college basketball season. I love it.
And next weekend seems to be even better than this weekend with a ton
Oh,
of great games.
oh yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah,
good ones. Oh, there's like three I'm loving. Philly, Arizona. Oh man, I'll be going. There's
yeah.
a lot of good ones.
So we'll definitely do squeeze in another episode sometime next week before next Saturday. Uh, and this has been episode number 41 of People Talk Fanatics.